Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I'm here today to discuss with you the results of James's evaluation, and I will go over what this all means along with recommendations based on his results. We started with the hearing screening, which he passed in being able to hear all the beeps we gave him. Since he passed, it does not look like he has hearing problems at this time and will not require additional screening for it. However, Mrs. Smith, you reported that James experienced recurrent ear infections between age 18 to 36 months. That is a sizable amount of time where during these ear infections, he had reduced hearing abilities and as a result, reduced ability to hear and learn language. It is very likely that all these ear infections reduced his exposure to language during those 18 months, which is a critical time for children to start picking up on language. I conducted an oral mechanism exam where I examined the structures of his mouth and head that relates to speech, just to check for anything structurally that may be abnormal and could point to difficulties that are physically producing speech sounds. Everything looks good there, no abnormalities, though he had difficulties following directions during this, which may indicate that he had a hard time comprehending the directions I gave him. I conducted some speech and language standardized assessments. These are standard assessments commonly used across the country in schools to assess speech and language. His average range for standard scores on these assessments was 85 to 115. This means that he is currently performing below what is expected in typically developing same-age peers. I did also see some articulation errors where he is substituting one sound for another. This is common in children when they are first learning to speak, which, as you had mentioned, you both have reported he is still working on his first 50 words, so it is expected to have some of these errors during that time. For example, he is unable and having trouble with F, V, K, G, W, and M in the initial position, so when it's at the beginning of the word. For example, for the word man, he pronounces it as ban. I conducted a language sample for James so we could look at his language in context. He was able to talk with me through playing with his toys, and I recorded 50 utterances or sentences to evaluate. With this, I was able to produce numbers that indicate where he is at in a linguistic productivity, looking at his sentence length, and variety in vocabulary. He scored lower than expected for children his age, where they should be showing longer sentences and more variety in vocabulary than where he currently is at. It is expected that children of James's age would be using sentences about 4 times as long and double the variety in vocabulary. I also collected a play sample of James to analyze using Westby's play scale criteria. This is an assessment and scale that shows us what play skills children should have at certain ages, as well as the language skills that should parallel them. He is functioning at about the 18-month level when it comes to his play skills. He demonstrated means and behavior that shows he notices and can recall cause and effect actions and reactions. He also demonstrates object permanence, which means he understands that toys continue to exist even when he can't see them or touch them. However, he did have difficulties pretending with objects outside of what they were intended for, and usually plays with just one toy at a time and not really combining those objects to play. During our evaluation of connected speech intelligibility, we were looking at how much of his speech we are able to understand. Mrs. Smith, although you reported you could understand 50% of his utterances, we used a neutral listener, that is somebody, a clinician who is not attuned to his speech as you may be, to evaluate. The neutral listener was only able to understand 20% of his words. To summarize our evaluation of James, he exhibited a moderate to severe delay in expressive skills, seen in his inability to put thoughts into words and sentences that were grammatically correct. He struggles with receptive skills, which means he had difficulties understanding words and meanings of what others say, such as the following directions. and along with the articulation skills, which we discussed earlier, where he was having difficulty producing the correct speech sounds for words. Next, for James, there should be additional assessment to determine the presence of phonological processes, which are patterns of sound errors that children use to simplify speech as they are learning to talk. As for my recommendations, it's recommended that James receive speech and language therapy 2 times a week for 60 minutes each time. And as for specific areas of recommendation that we would like to target is increasing the quality of single words so that we can all better understand him, improve his receptive language skills so that we could see him following these one-step directions with more success, and improving his expressive skills so that he can put his thoughts into words and we can get him to that 50 words mark that he's been working on.